I still remember the look on the doctor's face. It was the kind of look that makes your stomach drop before a single word is spoken, a mix of disbelief, confusion, and something else, maybe even fear. He stared at the computer screen, then back at me, then at my daughter. His lips moved, but it took a moment for the words to sink in. Your results, they're not what I expected. Now, I've had Alzheimer's for years. At least, that's what I was told. I felt it, the forgetting, the confusion, the moments where I can't remember if I'd already said something or just thought about saying it. You don't need a doctor to tell you when your own mind is disappearing. But that day, something had changed, and I couldn't tell if it was good news or the start of something worse. If you're wondering how a man with Alzheimer's ends up in a situation where a doctor is shocked by his test results, well, the story starts with my daughter. She's stubborn. She's hopeful to a fault. And she really believes, that miracles happen. One night, she came to me, eyes shining like she'd just found the cure herself. Dad, she said, there's a pastor, he can heal people. I've seen it. Now, I'm not a man who swallows fairy tales. I believe in God, sure, but I also believe in doctors, in medicine, in proof. And proof was what I'd been living with: brain scans, memory tests, the slow decline. You can't pray your way out of this, can you? So I told her no. But she didn't give up. Day after day, she brought it up again, sometimes gently, sometimes with tears. What's the harm in trying? She'd ask. What if it works? What if it works? That question stuck in my head like a splinter. Not because I believed it would, but because she needed me to try. There's something about having a daughter look at you like you're slipping away, and she's clutching at anything, to keep you here. You stop thinking about what makes sense, and you start thinking about what might give her hope for just a little longer. And so, a few weeks later, we found ourselves standing in the doorway of a small building that smelled faintly of incense and old wood. The air felt heavier in there, like it was holding its breath with us. The pastor greeted us with a smile that seemed to go right through me, like he was looking at the part of me I couldn't see anymore. I won't lie to you, part of me felt ridiculous. Another part felt angry at myself for giving in. But somewhere deep down, buried under layers of doubt and logic, there was also a flicker, so faint I almost didn't notice it, of something that felt like hope. And here's the truth, something did happen in that room. Something I can't fully explain. It wasn't lightning bolts or choirs of angels. It was quieter than that. Stranger than that. A month later, I was back in the doctor's office, staring at those test results that had him scratching his head. Were they wrong before? Did something change? Or, did a miracle really happen? I'll let you decide. But first, you need to know where this all began. The first time I noticed something was wrong, it was a small thing. I was driving home from the grocery store, a route I'd taken 1,000 times, when I pulled up to a stop sign and froze. I couldn't remember if I was supposed to turn left or right. I sat there long enough for the car behind me to honk. I laughed it off when I told my wife. Guess I need more coffee in the mornings, I joked. She smiled, but there was a flicker in her eyes, like she was filing that moment away. Then came other moments. Forgetting the name of a neighbor I'd known for decades. Searching for my reading glasses only to find them on my head. Misplacing bills, forgetting passwords, walking into a room and wondering why I was there. At first, you tell yourself it's just aging. Everyone forgets things. Everyone has those moments. But then it starts happening more. You find yourself covering for the mistakes, writing little notes to remind yourself of simple things, pretending you're fine when you're not. You develop tricks, repeating someone's name right after they say it, making little jokes about senior moments so no one worries too much. The breaking point came when I forgot my granddaughter's birthday. Not just the date, I forgot she even existed for a few seconds. My daughter was telling me about her school play, and I had to pretend I knew who she was talking about. When it finally clicked, I laughed, but inside, I felt something snap. It was like I had glimpsed the future, one where my entire family would be strangers to me. That's when my wife insisted I see a doctor. The tests were long and exhausting: memory exercises, brain scans, questions that felt like traps. What day is it? Who is the president? Count backward from 100 by sevens. At one point, the doctor handed me a list of 5 words to remember. 10 minutes later, I could only recall 2. By the end, I felt like a schoolboy who had failed the biggest exam of his life. A week later, we sat in the doctor's office. He closed the file slowly, like it weighed 100 pounds. "I'm sorry," he said. "You have early onset Alzheimer's." The words didn't land all at once. They sank in slowly, like cold water filling a sinking boat. My wife's hand tightened around mine. My daughter's eyes were already wet. I just sat there, nodding, like maybe if I agreed with him, the diagnosis would be less real. On the way home, the radio played a song I used to sing to my kids when they were little. For the first time, I couldn't remember all the words. My wife reached over and turned the volume down. The months that followed were a blur of adjustment. My wife became my caretaker in ways I hated, double-checking that I took my pills, reminding me to eat, keeping track of appointments I couldn't remember. My driver's license was taken away after I got lost trying to visit an old friend. I used to be the one people depended on, now, I was the one being managed. Losing independence is like being erased in slow motion. It's not just about forgetting, it's about being trusted less, watched more. Every time someone asked, "Do you remember?" it felt like another piece of me was gone. And then there was my daughter. She visited more often, always cheerful, always talking about things we could still do together. I knew she was trying to hide how scared she was. But sometimes I'd catch her looking at me the way you look at a photograph that's starting to fade, treasuring it, knowing it won't last. One afternoon, she brought me a photo album. We sat side by side, flipping through pages. She'd tell me the stories behind the pictures, and sometimes I remembered, sometimes I didn't. She didn't flinch when I got it wrong, she'd just smile and tell the story again. That patience, that's what made me realize how much this disease wasn't just mine. It belonged to all of us. I tried to stay strong for her. I cracked jokes about my Swiss cheese brain. I pretended I didn't mind when I forgot things. But inside, I was terrified. Terrified of the day I might look at her and not know who she was. One evening, we were sitting in the living room. I had forgotten the plot of a TV show we'd been watching together, even though we'd just watched it the night before. She paused the show, looked at me, and said quietly, "Dad, I don't want to lose you." I didn't know what to say. What do you say to your own child when you're slowly disappearing? I just reached over and squeezed her hand. It was a few weeks later that she first mentioned the pastor. At the time, I thought it was just one of those desperate ideas people cling to when they're faced with something they can't control. But that moment in the living room stayed with me. Her voice. The look in her eyes. And maybe that's why, despite my doubts, I didn't shut her down right away. It started casually. We were in the kitchen one afternoon, and I was struggling to open a jar of pickles. My hands aren't as strong as they used to be, but that day, it wasn't just my hands, I'd forgotten which way to twist the lid. My daughter laughed, took the jar, and opened it in one clean motion. "Dad," she said, "you should come with me to church this Sunday. There's someone I want you to meet." I thought it was just her way of getting me out of the house. "You trying to convert me into a saint?" I teased. She hesitated. "Not exactly. He's different. People say he can heal." I froze mid-bite of my sandwich. "Heal? You mean, like in the Bible?" She nodded, her eyes searching my face. "I've seen him pray for people. They walk away different. Stronger. Healthier. Some say their pain disappears." I set the sandwich down. "Sweetheart, you know I'm not against prayer. But Alzheimer's isn't a headache. It's not something you just pray away." Her lips tightened. "You don't know that." I sighed, trying to keep my voice gentle. "Honey, I've seen my scans. I've taken the tests. My brain is shrinking. That's not something a man waving his hands over me is going to fix." She didn't back down. She never does. "What if you're wrong?" What's the harm in trying? If it doesn't work, fine. But what if it does? That question landed like a pebble in my chest, sending ripples through the water. I wanted to tell her it was nonsense, that she was being naive. But I also saw the way her eyes shone when she spoke. There was something desperate behind them, the same desperation I'd felt the night she told me she didn't want to lose me. The next few days, she kept bringing it up in little ways. A text with a link to a video of the pastor praying for someone. A story about a woman whose vision was restored. A comment about just one Sunday, Dad. I kept brushing it off. I'll think about it became my stock answer. One night, I couldn't sleep. I lay there in the dark, listening to the clock tick, and I thought about all the things I was going to forget. My wife's laugh. My daughter's face. The smell of fresh coffee in the morning. If there was even the smallest chance this pastor could slow that down, was I really going to let pride or logic get in the way? The next morning, over breakfast, I said, "All right. I'll go. But I'm not promising to believe anything." She grinned like I'd just told her she'd won the lottery. "That's all I'm asking." We set a date. She gave me little details here and there, how the pastor didn't make a big show of things, how people described feeling a warmth in their bodies when he prayed. She told me not to expect fireworks, but I could hear the hope in her voice anyway. In the days leading up to it, I caught myself wondering what it would be like if it worked. Would I wake up one morning and remember everything again? Would the fog in my head lift, just like that? I felt foolish for imagining it, but I couldn't stop. When Sunday came, she picked me up early. On the drive there, she kept glancing at me like she was afraid I'd change my mind. "You don't have to do this if you don't want to," she said once, almost as if to give me an out. But I just looked out the window and said, "I gave you my word." What I didn't tell her was that I wasn't doing this for me. I was doing it for her. If she needed to believe in miracles, I could at least give her the chance to try. And so, we drove toward a small church on the edge of town, a place I'd passed 100 times without noticing. By the time we pulled into the parking lot, my hands were trembling. I told myself it was the cold, but deep down, I knew it was something else. The church was smaller than I'd expected. No towering stained glass, no grand pipe organ, just rows of wooden pews and the faint smell of incense mixed with old wood. Sunlight streamed through the plain windows, dust floating lazily in the beams. It was quiet in a way that made you feel noticed. My daughter led me down the aisle, her hand on my arm. I could feel her excitement in the way she gripped me firm, but almost trembling. The front rows were full, so we sat somewhere in the middle. The pastor was a tall man with kind eyes and a voice that didn't need a microphone. He spoke about faith, about how sometimes God works through medicine, and sometimes he works in ways that don't make sense. I sat there, trying to keep an open mind, but my thoughts kept drifting. Was I about to make a fool of myself? After the sermon, he invited anyone in need of healing to come forward. My daughter turned to me, her eyes saying everything she didn't dare speak aloud. I sighed, stood, and made my way up the aisle. Standing in front of him, I felt like a child again, nervous, small, and strangely hopeful. He asked my name, and I told him. He put a hand gently on my shoulder. His palm was warm, and for a moment, I forgot about the people watching. "What can I pray for you today?" he asked. "My mind," I said simply. He nodded, closed his eyes, and began to pray. His words were soft but steady, asking for clarity, for healing, for restoration. As he spoke, he placed his other hand lightly on the side of my head. At first, I felt nothing. Just the weight of his hand and the low hum of his voice. But then, something shifted. It started as a warmth, not just on my skin but somewhere deeper, as if it were moving through me. My chest loosened, and my breathing slowed. My mind didn't suddenly clear. Memories didn't come rushing back in some cinematic flash. But there was stillness. The kind I hadn't felt in years. I don't know how long he prayed. When he finished, he opened his eyes and looked into mine as if searching for something. "God's not done with you yet," he said quietly. I didn't know what to say. My daughter stepped forward, tears running freely down her cheeks. She hugged me like she was afraid I'd vanish if she let go. As we walked back to our seats, a few people patted my shoulder or smiled at me knowingly. I didn't know what they saw, but they seemed convinced something had happened. We stayed a little while longer, listening to the closing hymns. My daughter sang softly next to me, her voice breaking every now and then. I found myself humming along, something I hadn't done in ages. On the drive home, she kept glancing at me, searching for signs. "How do you feel?" she asked finally. "Peaceful," I said. It wasn't the answer she was hoping for, but it was the truth. That night, I sat in my chair by the window, watching the streetlights flicker on. I tried to remember the last time I'd felt that kind of peace. It wasn't a cure. But it was something. And maybe, just maybe, something had shifted in ways I couldn't see yet. The following weeks were ordinary in every outward sense. I still forgot small things, where I left my keys, whether I'd taken my pills. But there were moments that felt sharper, more present. Like one morning when I made coffee for my wife and realized I hadn't needed to check the instructions. Or when I recalled the name of my old high school teacher without anyone prompting me. I didn't tell my daughter right away. I didn't want to give her false hope. But she noticed. She always notices. One evening, she asked me to sit with her at the kitchen table. She had her laptop open, and she was showing me old photos, trips we'd taken, family holidays. Usually, I'd have to fake recognition or let her fill in the details. But that night, I remembered more than I'd forgotten. Her eyes lit up every time I finished one of the stories without her help. Maybe it was the pastor. Maybe it was the power of suggestion. Maybe it was something else entirely. I didn't know. But I agreed to go back the following month. Because deep down, even if I didn't fully believe in miracles, I was starting to believe in something. The second time I saw that doctor, I wasn't expecting anything unusual. It had been about a month since I'd gone to see the pastor, and while I felt different somehow, I told myself it was probably just the calm that came from trying something new. The clinic smelled the same as always, a mix of disinfectant and old magazines. My daughter sat next to me in the waiting room, scrolling through her phone, pretending she wasn't nervous. I could tell by the way her leg bounced. When the nurse called my name, I followed her back to the same little exam room I'd been in countless times before. She took my blood pressure, asked how I was feeling, and left me with the sound of the clock ticking on the wall. Then the doctor walked in. He smiled politely, shook my hand, and opened the file on his desk. I expected the usual, a polite nod, a few notes, maybe a suggestion to adjust my medication. But instead, he just stared. First at the papers, then at me, then back at the papers again. Finally, he leaned back in his chair. "Your results, they're not what I expected." My daughter leaned forward. "What do you mean?" He tapped the papers with his pen. "Your latest scans show less progression than we anticipated. In fact, there are areas where your cognitive function seems improved compared to your last test." I frowned. Improved? Is that even possible? He shrugged, clearly still processing it himself. With Alzheimer's, we typically see a steady decline. Stabilization is rare, and improvement, well, it's extremely rare. There's no medication change in your file that would explain it. My daughter's hand gripped mine so tightly I could feel her pulse. "So, are you saying he's getting better?" The doctor hesitated. "I'm saying that, according to these tests, there's been measurable improvement. But I can't tell you why." We sat there in silence for a moment. I could feel my daughter's eyes on me, practically glowing with the words she didn't say, the pastor. I didn't say it either. Part of me didn't want to give her that victory. Part of me didn't know if I believed it myself. The doctor went over the numbers again, pointing to charts and diagrams. He spoke about brain function like it was a puzzle he couldn't quite solve. I half listened, my mind drifting back to that quiet moment in the pastor's hands, the warmth, the stillness, the way my daughter had looked at me afterward. As we left the clinic, my daughter was practically skipping. "Dad, this is amazing." "You heard him. He said improved." I kept my voice even. We don't know what caused it. She grinned. I do. I didn't argue. Over the next few weeks, we kept the results mostly to ourselves. My wife noticed little changes. I was following conversations better, remembering more details from the day before. She didn't question it much, just smiled and kissed my cheek like she knew something good had happened. I still had Alzheimer's. I still had bad days. But the decline that had felt like a runaway train now seemed slower. And on some days, it felt like the brakes had been applied altogether. One afternoon, I sat with my daughter on the porch. The sun was setting, painting the sky in streaks of orange and pink. She sipped her tea, then looked at me and said, "Do you ever think about why it happened?" I stared out at the horizon. Every day. And, she pressed. I took a deep breath. I think, sometimes the mind is more than just the brain. And sometimes love pushes us to try things we'd never try otherwise. She smiled softly, satisfied with that answer. Whether it was a miracle, a medical anomaly, or just a moment of grace, I don't know. But I do know this: I walked into that church for her. And maybe, just maybe, I walked out with more than either of us expected. When I look back now, I realize the story isn't just about Alzheimer's, or about a pastor, or even about test results. It's about what we're willing to do for the people we love. I walked into that church a skeptic. I left feeling, not cured, but changed. Not just because of anything the pastor did, but because my daughter refused to give up on me. I think about that a lot. How, when we're sick, the fight isn't just ours, it belongs to everyone who loves us. My daughter's hope pulled me into that moment, and maybe that hope did more healing than I'll ever understand. The doctor still can't explain my results. Maybe he never will. And honestly, I'm okay with that. Sometimes, we don't need all the answers to know something meaningful happened. I still have Alzheimer's. I still forget things. But I also have moments, more than before, where I feel present, where I remember, where I get to be me again. And those moments are worth everything. If you're watching this, maybe you or someone you love is facing something that feels impossible. I'm not here to tell you that a pastor, or a prayer, or a miracle will solve it. But I am here to tell you that hope matters. That trying matters. That love can make us walk through doors we never imagined we'd step through. I didn't go to that church because I believed it would work. I went because my daughter believed it would. And maybe, in the end, that was enough. So, whatever you're facing, don't give up. Don't stop showing up for the people you love. And if a door opens, even if you're not sure what's on the other side, maybe walk through it. Thank you for listening to my story. If it meant something to you, if it made you think, or even if it just reminded you to hold on a little longer, then I hope you'll stick around. Subscribe to the channel, share this video with someone who needs it, and let's keep telling stories that matter.